Throughout the annals of history, few figures evoke such dread in the hearts of empires as Spartacus. This remarkable individual defied the shackles of servitude, making the audacious transformation from a captured warrior to the most feared adversary that Rome had ever encountered within its own borders. Spartacus's saga transcends mere rebellion. It unfolds as an epic narrative of how a gladiator's smoldering indignation ignited an insurrection that nearly toppled the formidable Roman Republic. Imagine the year 73 BCE. Rome stood as the uncontested sovereign of the Mediterranean, its legions perceived as invulnerable, and its citizens intoxicated by the wealth generated from the brutal exploitation of countless slaves. The Romans held a dangerous conviction of their system's invincibility and the permanence of their dominance, a belief that would soon be shattered. Within the walls of a gladiator school in Capua, a Thracian warrior was on the verge of demonstrating that even the most powerful empire could bleed when struck by the oppressed masses it had subjugated. Spartacus's name has resonated through millennia, serving as a beacon of inspiration for revolutionaries, a specter of terror for tyrants, and a captivating saga for countless generations. Yet, the reality of his rebellion, the blood-soaked, desperate struggle unfolds in a far grimmer and more extraordinary manner than any cinematic portrayal could hope to convey. This account narrates how a man, stripped of everything except his fervent desire for freedom, grew to lead the largest slave uprising in human history. What compelled a captured warrior to gamble everything for the taste of liberty? How did a mere handful of gladiators, armed with makeshift weapons, evolve into an army that consistently bested Roman legions? And why did this rebellion send tremors across every corner of the ancient world? The answers lie not only in understanding the man himself, but also in grasping the monstrous system he dared to challenge, a system built on human misery that Rome believed would endure indefinitely. Historians would later label this insurrection the Third Servile War. It spanned 3 tumultuous years and claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. It transformed the Italian landscape into a raging battlefield where slaves fought their masters with a ferocity that ensnared the Roman elite in fear. This conflict was more than an escape attempt. It fundamentally questioned the very foundations of Roman civilization and the institution of slavery itself. To appreciate the magnitude of Spartacus's feat, we must first comprehend the sheer horror of his world. Roman slavery was not merely a form of bondage. It was a calculated system of dehumanization designed to obliterate the spirit alongside the body. Gladiators, for instance, were trained killers compelled to die for the amusement of spectators, their lives measured not by the years lived but by victories that might momentarily postpone their fatal fates in the arena. Yet from this abyss of despair arose a leader endowed with tactical brilliance and a charismatic command that united an unparalleled diversity of desperate souls. Thracians, Gauls, Germans, captured soldiers, household slaves, and mine workers, all rallying under his banner to demonstrate that even at the zenith of Rome's power, the empire's foundations were as fragile as sand. This is the narrative of Spartacus, a warrior, slave, gladiator, and the man who came closer than anyone else to delivering a fatal blow to the heart of Rome. It is a story of courage forged in adversity, of unity blossoming in oppression, and of how the human spirit, when pushed to its limits, can attain the unimaginable. However, it is also a tale tinged with tragedy, a stark reminder that even the most formidable rebellion may be quashed when confronted with the overwhelming might of an empire determined to cling to its way of life at any cost. Spartacus was born into a world defined by relentless warfare and ruthless conquest. His homeland, Thrace, spanned the rugged mountains and verdant valleys of what is now Bulgaria and northern Greece. It was a realm inhabited by fierce warriors and proud tribes who revered honor above all else. The Thracians gained a fearsome reputation in the ancient world, renowned for their curved swords and battle cries that instilled terror in their enemies. However, Thrace's strategic location rendered it a perpetual target for encroaching empires. Nestled at the crossroads between Europe and Asia, it became a coveted prize for ambitious rulers seeking to control vital trade routes and expand their territories. Despite their martial prowess, the Thracian tribes found themselves increasingly pressured by the looming power of Rome, which, by the 1st century BCE, was hell-bent on complete dominion over the known world. The Roman war machine was unprecedented, and its legions moved with a cold, mechanical lethality that shattered resistance with calculated precision. Roman conquests did not merely entail the defeat of opposing armies. They involved the systematic dismantling of entire cultures. The conquerors enslaved populations, desecrated sacred sites, and imposed Roman law in place of local customs. To the Romans, such actions were not manifestations of cruelty, but rather embodiments of civilization. The process of capture itself had become a carefully orchestrated horror. Roman slavers trailed behind military campaigns, rounding up survivors like cattle. Families were separated, individuals were branded as human property, and countless souls were shipped across the empire to labor according to the desires of their new masters. Warriors like Spartacus, given their combat experience, were particularly prized, making them ideal candidates for the gladiatorial schools that catered to the brutal entertainment demands of Roman citizens. The transformation from free warrior to enslaved gladiator was meticulously designed to obliterate any possibility of rebellion or resistance. Captives were shackled together and marched for hundreds of miles under adverse conditions, their postures broken through minimal sustenance and violent rebukes at any recognition of defiance. Those who died along the route were left unnoticed, serving as a grim warning to the living of the fate that awaited those unwilling to submit to their new reality. Roman slavery operated on a scale that stretches the limits of contemporary comprehension. Historians estimate that by the 1st century BCE, somewhere between 30 to 40% of Italy's population was enslaved. This institution was not merely ancillary. It was a cornerstone of the economic foundation upon which Roman prosperity thrived. Forced labor underpinned everything from agriculture to manufacturing and from domestic servitude to public entertainment. The legal structures that supported slavery were just as thorough and dehumanizing. Roman law classified slaves as property, mere tools lacking agency. As one legal scholar remarked, masters had absolute power over their human property, including the right to kill without consequence. A slave's testimony was only admissible in court if coerced through torture, reflecting the ingrained assumption that they would inherently lie to shield themselves. Yet, even within this oppressive framework, select types of slaves occupied special positions. Gladiators were among the most valuable and simultaneously the most dangerous form of property in Roman eyes. Trained killers, these individuals embodied a profound contradiction within the Roman social order: warriors imprisoned as slaves, entertainers capable of murder, and instrumental investments who could turn lethal with a mere hint of rebellion. Spartacus's eventual revolt would expose this critical contradiction, as his insatiable thirst for justice rose as a direct result of the brutal system imposed upon him. The schools that trained gladiators were veritable factories of death veiled under the guise of entertainment. These institutions, known as ludi, epitomized the darkest amalgamation of Roman ingenuity and cruelty. Within their confines, broken men captured warriors, condemned criminals, and desperate volunteers were transformed into lethal combatants destined to die gloriously for the amusement of the spectators. The ludus at Capua, where Spartacus was confined, was overseen by Lentulus Batiatus, a figure whose name has become synonymous with grotesque Roman excess and brutality. Batiatus owned roughly 200 gladiators, each representing a hefty financial investment. A trained gladiator might command a price equating to that of 10 ordinary workers, yet the profits garnered from successful fighters justifiably rendered this expense worthwhile, particularly when orchestrated deaths could maximize dramatic effect. Life inside these schools combined rigorous training with psychological manipulation. Gladiators were roused before dawn for exercises aimed at refining their combat skills while simultaneously solidifying their subservient status. They practiced with wooden weapons under the scrutiny of seasoned trainers, former gladiators who had managed to secure their freedom yet opted to remain within the only realm they had ever known. The architecture of gladiatorial schools was a reflection of their dual purpose as training facilities and prisons. Thick, spiked walls served to deter escape, while interiors designed for combat practice remained under relentless vigilance. Living quarters were intentionally cramped and uncomfortable, preemptively discouraging any strong bond formation among gladiators. The Romans realized that isolation facilitated control more easily than unity. However, an inherent contradiction lay buried within the gladiatorial schools, one that Rome's leaders failed to contemplate fully. Each day, these institutions trained men armed for combat while simultaneously striving to hold them in bondage. Gladiators honed techniques to kill effortlessly and surmount perilous scenarios, studying the weaknesses of adversaries and learning to exploit fleeting opportunities. Skills honed for the arena would soon prove invaluable in the face of rebellion. Moreover, the psychological warfare exercised against gladiators relied on sophisticated manipulation. Trainers coaxed rivalry, incentivizing small privileges for those who reported on potential troublemakers. They constructed artificial hierarchies to convince some fighters that compliance might eventually lead to freedom. Meanwhile, Roman spectators, watching the games, remained oblivious to the complex emotions rippling beneath the arena's surface. They perceived brave warriors battling for glory, unaware of the broken men compelled to kill one another for meager scraps of dignity. Yet amidst the despair and desperation, a profound revolution was brewing. Spartacus, who had entered Capua as a mere captured Thracian, was becoming something infinitely more formidable under the cruel regime of gladiatorial training, a leader endowed with an acute understanding of warfare and profound human desperation. The tipping point came in an unremarkable incident on an ordinary day in 73 BCE, initially stemming from an argument over food. Fuming at the punishment meted out by the guards, Spartacus and around 70 fellow gladiators seized the moment, having orchestrated their escape plans for weeks. It was a remarkable episode of improvised warfare, a furious uprising armed with nothing but kitchen knives and cooking spits. The gladiators swiftly overpowered their guards through sheer violence and tactical coordination, moving with precision that belied their status as mere slaves. Their innate warrior instincts guided their actions as surprise and familiarity with their surroundings allowed them to seize actual weapons before reinforcements could arrive. But Spartacus recognized that escape alone marked only the beginning of a much larger struggle. The countryside surrounding Capua was teeming with Roman soldiers, slave catchers, and informants who would surely seek to recapture any fleeing gladiators. Instead of scattering like frightened prey, Spartacus made a momentous decision that cemented his status as a military leader. He chose to fight back. The initial days of the rebellion exhibited Spartacus's tactical genius and understanding of psychological warfare. Rather than retreat into hiding, the escaped gladiators launched offensives against isolated farms and settlements, liberating enslaved individuals and seizing weapons. Each successful raid not only bolstered their ranks but also sent a potent message to enslaved populations throughout the region. Resistance was not only feasible but could lead to freedom for those brave enough to take a stand. News of the gladiator rebellion swept through Italy's enslaved communities like wildfire. For the first time, evidence emerged that Romans could bleed. Their esteemed military dominance was not absolute, and the subjugated populace could claim their dignity through rebellion. The Roman response to these early incursions starkly illustrated how grossly they underestimated the threat. Local magistrates dispatched small contingents of ill-equipped soldiers and slave catchers, anticipating a minor disturbance that would be swiftly quelled. They could not begin to conceive that a band of escaped gladiators could pose a significant danger to Roman authority. This underestimation would prove disastrous as Spartacus and his growing army leveraged every victory to attract more followers and acquire enhanced weaponry. The composition of Spartacus's burgeoning force reflected the rich tapestry of Roman oppression. Household slaves who endured daily beatings allied with miners toiling in treacherous conditions, while captured warriors from distant lands united with debt slaves sold off to settle their masters' financial obligations. What bound them together was not shared ethnicity or language, but the collective experience of Roman brutality coupled with a relentless thirst for revenge. As summer surrendered to autumn, a rebellion that began as a mere gladiatorial escape had metamorphosed into a full-scale insurrection threatening the bedrock of Roman society. Spartacus had proven that with capable leadership, even the most downtrodden could morph into fearsome adversaries. The stage was set for a clash that would ascertain if Rome's legendary military apparatus could contend with an enemy fighting not for conquest or glory, but for the most profound and driving motivator of all freedom. The evolution of Spartacus's band from desperate escapees into a formidable military entity occurred with frightening swiftness. Within mere months after their break from Capua, they burgeoned from a wretched grouping of 70 men to an army numbering tens of thousands, poised to challenge the empire that had so cruelly sought to annihilate their spirit.